800.
And that brings to a close questions for oral answer. I call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
International Finance Agreements Amendment Bill, first reading.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I move that the International Finance Agreements Amendment Bill be now read the first time. Mr Speaker, this bill will amend the International Finance Agreements Act 1961. This Act allows the Government of New Zealand to meet its obligations as a member of various financial institutions, including the International Monetary Fund and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The Amendment Bill updates the Act to give effect to the changes to the Articles of Agreement of the IMF, which were agreed to by the Governors in 2008 and 2010. Mr Speaker, I just want to talk briefly about the role of the IMF in the current context of global volatility. Risks of another global financial crisis are real, and in whichever region a crisis might stem from, we will all face negative economic consequences given the interconnectedness of the global economy. It is organisations like the IMF that can help steer countries through turbulent times. IMF member countries such as New Zealand pay a shareholding contribution to the IMF so that the organisation can loan money to countries that are experiencing a balance of payments crisis and cannot find sufficient financing on affordable terms. This helps prevent a situation where a country has to default on paying debt due to insufficient capital and therefore prevents adverse shocks occurring in the global economy. The IMF also provides advice to governments and central banks based on analysis of economic trends and cross-country experiences, in addition to research and statistics based on its tracking of global, regional and individual economies and markets. For these reasons, New Zealand takes its membership of the IMF seriously. We believe it is important to be an active participant in the international system, whether it is by being an active member of multilateral organisations such as the UN, regional organisations such as the Pacific Islands Forum, or an economic organisation such as the IMF. As a small open economy, we benefit considerably from a stable and prosperous global economy.
Order. Could I ask members, please, there's too much noise and I can't hear, but the Minister, can I refer the Minister to Standing Order 283.1. The Minister should, at the commencement of his speech, indicate to the House the committee he nominates and should consider the bill, and that's Standing Order 283.1. So I ask the Minister, before he continues, to actually do that now. Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I move that the bill be referred to the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee. Mr Speaker, our commitments to the IMF are effectively premiums to an insurance policy against damage to our economy from an unstable world. Contributing to the IMF and global financial stability is also part of our international reputation. Mr Speaker, the changes to the Articles of Agreement are integral parts of an overall package designed to bolster the resources available to the IMF and enhance its legitimacy and effectiveness by ensuring that members' voting shares and voice appropriately reflect changing relative economic weight in the global economy. The amendment to the Articles will assist in facilitating the agreed change in the composition of the IMF's Executive Board and its future evolution by removing the right of the 5 largest fund members to appoint an Executive Director and allowing instead for an all-elected board. Consequently, passing this bill will signal New Zealand's support for reform, additional resourcing and better legitimacy in an important financial institution. Mr Speaker, this is in the context particularly of the push by emerging economies to have a say in multilateral institutions which reflects their growing economic weight. Financially, this bill will mean an increase to New Zealand's quota commitment to the IMF. However, members of the new Arrangements to Borrow program, of which New Zealand is a member, have agreed that they will undertake a corresponding decrease in their commitment to that program. Overall, this means that our commitment to the IMF remains relatively constant. constant, moving from 1,518 million SDRs, that's standard drawing rights, to 1,592 million SDRs, approximately New Zealand dollars 2.9 billion to 3 billion. New Zealand has already agreed to these changes. Adopting the International Finance Agreements Amendment Bill simply puts that agreement into practice. The bill also creates a regulation-making power in the Principal Act so that further updates to the articles can be made by regulation. This power will simplify the process by which New Zealand meets its obligations. Once changes to the articles are agreed to by the requisite majority of members to the IMF, New Zealand will be bound by the amendments, which means that we are required to bring our domestic legislation into line with our international obligations. The decision to approve changes to the Articles of Agreement at the IFIs is effectively made at the time that the Minister of Finance votes on the matter as a governor of the institutions. Furthermore, the regulation-making power would not be unique. The Legislative Advisory Committee guidelines note that a number of acts have future-proofing clauses that allow the executive, rather than the Parliament, to update the text of a treaty. And in the context of the IMF, there is likely in the future to be further changes in their processes reflecting the changing economic significance of different members. These changes do not mean we will change the way in which we consult on important IMF policy changes. Rather, this bill is about demonstrating our commitment to multilateral action, as well as simplifying the processes needed to update our own legislation to reflect what has already been agreed to with the IMF. Mr. Speaker, I commend the bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak to this